What's going on, guys? Welcome back, and today I'm going to be making my final video on Avengers Endgame. So I've watched the movie again, and I've finally, I think, realized, what the movie is to me. And, yeah, so I'm going to get into my points on, my criticisms of the movie. In this video, I'm going to be packing it all into one video. I'm not going to be discussing all the problems that I have with the movie. I've already discussed some of those in the other videos. I've made, I think, at least 3 or 4 other videos talking about my problems with Endgame, Hulk, and Thanos, and then just a video talking about it. So, this video will be the final video I make on Endgame. This is not my image, by the way. I searched out this image. This is, I believe, from Brickforce Studios' Lego Avengers Assemble brick film or stop motion, so credit to him. I'm not stealing his footage or not trying to have any copyrighted material or anything. So yeah, I don't own the rights to this image. I just thought I'd say that. But anyway, this is gonna be my last video on Endgame, and it's I know a lot of people love it, and I loved it at first. It's just, the movie just keeps getting worse and worse the more I think about it. There are great things in it, and before I get all negative and people are going to tell me I'm negative or whatever, let's talk about the things I do like about the movie. Black Widow is the best character in the entire movie. I've talked about that in the past. I actually think she's the best character. There aren't any problems with her story arc in the movie. I've actually found some problems with Tony's character arc in this movie. But her character is fine, and just probably the best character in the movie. Next to that is Scott Lang, a genuinely funny character that I think they do a great job with, not making him seem too much like a joke and treating him with disrespect like I think they do with Peter Quill or Star-Lord in this movie. And then just being a really enjoyable character to watch and having an emotional moment and just being one of the best characters in the movie. I like the scene when Hawkeye goes back in time and for the test run and sees the baseball glove. It's a nice emotional moment. I like basically everything before the 5-year gap, because after the 5-year gap, that's where all my problems come in. All the introduction is pretty decent. It's not really great to me, coming off of Infinity War. And that's the problem when you're writing a movie that is a follow-up to a movie that ends with, such a big tragedy and such an ending that should have been a cliffhanger for longer than it was, but wasn't. And now we just have this movie that is, I think, just a really weak follow-up. And just that's the problem when you write a movie about characters losing and then writing your entire next movie around those characters just reversing what happened in the last movie. That's hard to do, and this movie has a lot of trouble doing that. So I think those are the main things that I really like about the movie. I like the final battle quite a bit, even though I don't like Thanos, this version of Thanos. I do enjoy his entrance at the end when he walks through the ship beam or whatever. It's a really cool scene with the original music cue from when he arrived in Wakanda at the end of Infinity War. I do think Tony's ending is very satisfying, and I think Captain America's ending is satisfying, but that is where we're going to get into my first negative, which is the Captain America. The thing is, I can excuse the time travel element being flawed. I can excuse that with most movies, because basically every time travel movie, except Back to the Future for the most part, has plot holes in its execution of its time travel ideas. But this movie, I think, does a really bad job of the time travel, but we're not going to talk about that. I can excuse the flawed time travel, if only that people would actually admit to the fact that they didn't write this. And I got a comment on my last video, and I'm going to try and sound the least cynical as possible, because in one of my past videos criticizing the movie, I sounded way too cynical and I hated the movie. Which I don't hate this movie. I think it's a good movie, and it's just, for me, the problems that it has, I can't ignore as easily as other people, when it's just, people say this movie's made for the fans, and for the most part it is, but when they say it's made for the fans, they just mean a lot of the fan service. I'm a big, long-time fan of these films, and, I got out of them for a while, but since I've gotten back into them, I've really grown to appreciate them, and as just a huge fan of these movies, this movie just, it just feels like they don't treat the fans like they really have a brain. That sounds really cynical, but just it feels like it doesn't treat the fans like they have any respect for the fans, like in the way of actually giving a well-told story and not just covering it with fan service to hide its flaws. And so that's one of my problems with the Captain America ending, is just the thematic purpose of it really bothers me, in that they set up this arc for him and Sharon Carter throughout Winter Soldier and Civil War, and apparently there's an original cut where he's living his life with Sharon after the 5-year gap, which would have worked out okay. But it's just like, in this movie, why, when the writers said they have Peggy Carter in Winter Soldier say, "I live my life. My only regret is that you didn't get to live yours." Why would you write that in if, in the end, and then just say, "We planned this from the beginning"? No, like, you didn't plan this. And people were like, "Oh, that dance was planned from the beginning." No, it wasn't. Where did you hear that from? Like, let me know. Like, no offense to you, I forget what his name was, but someone commented on my last video saying the dance was planned from the beginning. I've thought more about it, it's not. And I think it's a really bad form of storytelling for just writers and directors to say, "Oh, you didn't see this in the movie, but we actually planned this all along." Like, it feels kind of insulting, like, as a fan of the movies, just for them to be like, "We planned this." I just think it's a bad form of storytelling. Infinity War, there were a few questions after it. But with this movie, it's like, there's so many questions after the release that just they have to explain because of the flaws in their story, and they're just like saying, "Actually, we wrote this in," when they actually didn't, and they're just making excuses. Like, what's the thematic purpose of Sharon Carter? Why would you write in this other character and not do anything with it, and then just decide, okay, you know, whatever, we're just gonna have him go live with Peggy, which I think is satisfying, but and I can excuse the time travel rules not really making much sense, but why would you introduce this other character and have the Peggy Carter in Winter Soldier say, my only regret is you didn't get to live your life," basically? Like, why would you write that in? Why would you say that when, like, "Oh, we planned this"? No, they didn't plan it. Don't believe that. They never planned this from the beginning. They're just saying that to cover up, like, their bad storytelling in, like, the form that they set up an arc with him and Sharon. It's like, what does Cap really do in the movie other than just, like, be there for the plot and hang around until his character needs to end at the very end? Like, he just kind of serves his purpose, but, like, what does he really do in the movie? Like, it doesn't really do much. Like, when people say it's the Captain America and Tony Stark movie, I don't really see that. I think it's definitely the Tony movie, but for Cap, it's like, I don't know. It's not just the time travel rules that bug me, it's just the thematic purpose of the character. It just bothers me the way that they are saying that they planned it when they really didn't, and it just really bothers me personally. Just that execution of the story of Captain America just kind of bugs me. Then we're gonna get into Tony, and Tony's character in this movie is, like I've already said, one of the best characters, I think, behind Black Widow and Scott Lang. But my problem with him is what I realized is what they're trying to say, what they're trying to portray with the character, which I got from the very beginning, was he's this character that has feared Thanos for 6 years. He's been in his head since he sent the nuke through the wormhole in New York in 2012. And he just can't, he's just stressing about it all the time. He can't rest. You see that in Iron Man 3. He knows this threat is coming, and then eventually he fails. But in Endgame, the threat already happened. The thing he always feared already happened. So when the 5-year gap happens, he is actually peaceful, and what he always feared happened. But then, what they're trying to say is, like, okay, he's okay now, he's resting happy. But then when he sits down with Pepper and says, "I can put a lock in this right now, I can throw it to the bottom of the lake, and we can go to bed." And then she says, "But would you be able to rest?" And it's like, so wait, you're saying that he actually hasn't been resting. So it just feels like it contradicts what this character is. Like, let me know if I'm missing something and if he's actually depressed. But, like, the reason why he basically agrees is because he looks at a picture of Peter Parker and realizes that he failed him. But the thing is, like, what they're trying to say is that he's moved on, basically, when the other characters are saying they can't move on. But if they're saying that, can you rest, they're saying that he actually hasn't been able to rest, which contradicts what they're saying, you know? And then not only that, just the other stuff about the character, there's two contradictions, or just dumb things in the final ending where he records the message to Pepper, and just even before that are just really weird to me. And so they are is when he's recording the message, he says, actually no, we're gonna go to that later, but he says, when he says in his speech at the end, he says, if you had told me 10 years ago that we weren't alone to this extent, I wouldn't have been surprised. But I mean, come on, the forces of light and darkness that have come into play. It's not been 10 years. It's been 15 by timeline wise. But who cares about continuity? I do. It's really dumb. I don't know why they said that. He says, if you had told me 10 years ago, and this thing I'm going to get into later, but it's like with this, it's like all you need to do is have him say a different line, but they just didn't think about it hard enough. They're like, oh, we'll just have him say 10 years, and timeline wise, 20, and you could say, oh, that was the events of Iron Man 3, but when he says, if you told me that we were alone, I mean to this extent, you're talking about Iron Man, I think he's talking about Iron Man 1, which is when he first realized that he wasn't alone, when Nick Fury walks in and says, you think you're the only superhero in the world. I'm here to talk to you about the Avenger Initiative. So, I think he's referring to that. But even timeline-wise, that doesn't make sense, because it's not been 10 years, it's been 15 since then, technically, right? So, 10 years ago in this timeline, whereas 2023 would be 2013, which is Thor the Dark World. Iron Man 3 isn't in 2013. The movie was released in 2013. It takes place later in 2012 after the events of the Avengers. So, even that doesn't make sense. And you could say, oh, maybe it's referring to, just the release order of the films. Even if they're trying to be self-aware in that regard, it doesn't make sense because it's been 11 years since Iron Man came out. Let me know if I'm being, you could be like, oh, you're looking too hard into it, but I'm like, it's just such a simple thing they could have changed. But they didn't, and it just creates this huge, continuity error. Marvel's never been good with their timelines. Like with Spider-Man Homecoming saying 8 years later. But just please, why didn't they just think about what they were gonna have him say in that line? Because it makes no sense, and the moment's very investing, and you're wrapped up in it, but it's you actually think about it, and you're like, no, it's been 15 years since what he's talking about. So, in any regard, that doesn't work. 10 years ago. That doesn't work in any regard, timeline-wise, or movie release-wise. And then the last thing is, it feels like the time travel, the characters, it's the show don't tell rule in film, which is actually show what you're talking about rather than just talk about it. And throughout the entire movie, characters are treating the time heist like it's this big risk. But while it's happening, the characters are joking around and having a good time. And that worked in Infinity War, because Infinity War is taking place before this big event, the decimation, the snap happens. So you're having a good time with the movie until the final scene where you realize that, oh crap, they lost, they failed, and they were so cocky and confident in themselves that they just didn't think about it and they actually lost. But in this movie, their attitude, their jokey, fun attitude while they're traveling through time doesn't work, because this event has already happened. They shouldn't be this cheerful. And characters just keep saying, the Ancient One is in order to bring the stones back, Bruce, you have to survive. And then Tony says, in his message, he says, because they didn't know, that's the problem when you're writing a story like this, is he says, this whole time travel thing we're going to pull off tomorrow, it has me scratching my head about the survivability of it all. But the thing is, he recorded this before the time heist, but that doesn't even make any sense, because the time heist isn't dangerous at all. The actual rules of time travel in this movie aren't interesting or have any consequence to them. So just characters saying that, Ant-Man's guys, if you go back to the 1970s or whatever, he doesn't know they're going to the 1970s, but he says, if you do this, you might not be able to come back, and if it doesn't work, you might not come back. They just keep saying, oh my gosh, this is huge risk, but it's actually not. So it's just, it's just so dumb that Tony says, I'm scratching my head about the survivability of it all, because, that wasn't his cause of death. He survived the time heist. His cause of death was Thanos appearing out of nowhere, which he couldn't have predicted at all. So, it's just really stupid to me, and it really bothers me in that regard as well. So that's it for what I'm going to talk about Tony, and then we're just going to talk about the other small things I didn't think about, which is just small things that if you think about them make no sense. Hawkeye, the building explodes, the Avengers facility gets bombed, and the way that it works is so stupid. They get shot, and then they just, fall through the floor. If I was in that building, I would be blown to bits. I wouldn't just fall through the floor. Fine, Rhodey, Tony, I understand they're in suits. Hulk is strong, even though he just severely injured himself. Thor's a god, Captain America's the super soldier, but Rocket and Hawkeye, they're just like fragile beings. Like they can't survive that. It's just really dumb. Like Rocket's under a bunch of rubble, but it's like you would be dead. Like they would be, hey Rocket, are you okay? And he's just a flat pancake on the ground. Like he'd be dead. Like it's stupid in that regard. But then Clint turns around, shoots a light up arrow down this hallway, and then like there's these Outrider aliens in the tunnel, and I'm like, how did they get there? Like the best explanation for that could be they just tunneled under there after the events of Wakanda and Infinity War, ran around Earth, I guess, and then just like tunneled themselves under the Avengers compound, which is a completely contrived like resolution to that. But like they didn't come from the ship, because no one's come down from the ship, because in the next scene, literally the next shot, Thanos comes down. So like it's like, what? You know, like, so just like if they just shown like them being beamed down, it's like these things where they could have had one shot to fix it. Like there's this whole Pym particle thing. They're like, oh, we need to get Pym particles. So they keep saying it. They're like repeating it, like one round trip each. And then Nebula from the past kidnaps future Nebula, goes to Thanos from the past, and is like, here's my Pym particle. And then he takes it and he's like, well done, daughter. And then she goes to the future. But that should be the only one she has left. She has one to go back and one to come back. So how did she get back if she gave him the one? And then, I don't know if the directors have said this, but once again, that's really dumb, because they're just like, oh, we wrote this in, but you didn't see it. It's because they didn't think about it, and they just are saying that they thought about it. But, like, just give me one shot of Squidward, like, cloning the Pym particles, and then, like, people are like, oh, he cloned them. Just give me one it could be 2 seconds of just Squidward cloning the particles, and you could have fixed up this whole plot hole, because she just sticks her fingers in the freaking control panel. Sorry about my language, but she just sticks her fingers in the control panel and pulls Thanos from the past. So whatever, that doesn't make any sense. But then, like, his whole army just appears out of nowhere, and these ships start landing, and it's like, my dad was like, they're coming from the mothership, they're coming from the big ship. No, they're not. Like, look at the size of that ship, and look at the size of those ships. Where are they coming from? Like, they don't have enough Pym particles to get from the past to the future. And it's like, if you just think about it, it's like, if they just had Thanos show up and just beam down and then not have him blow it up, then you could have stopped this complete contrived thing of, like, everyone surviving. Like, I understand they want a cool, desolate landscape, but, like, they could have just had him come and fight them, and then this whole other plot thing that's really stupid didn't have to be in there. You know, it's just these little things that you think about, and you're like, why didn't they think about these things? You know, it just kind of bothers me. Then there's Rhodey's new suit that comes, like, and people pointed this out, that in the shot of Ant-Man where he's, like, in the destroyed facility, and Rhodey and Rocket are like, we're stuck on the lower levels, and then he's like, I'm coming. You can see Rhodey's new suit behind him, which explains how he got it in the final battle, but, like, then you think about that even, and you're like, but wait, like, how did he get it to them? Did he, like, shrink it, then carry it to Rhodey? But, like, he'd have to shrink down really small, and then grow really big, but, like, how does he get the suit to them? Like, how does he actually get it there, to them, like, on the lower levels? Like, it's just, like, actually thinking about it, it makes no sense. Even if they put it in behind Scott, it still doesn't make sense how he got it to Rhodey. And, you know, it's just like, what are the rules of the Soul Stone as well? Like, Black Widow goes off the cliff, but it's like, Red Skull specifically says, you must lose that which you love. And I get that they love each other in, like, not like a romantic way, but in like a, you know, like a platonic, like, buddy sort of way. But, like, so you can get the Soul Stone, like, is it just the rules, like, if two people show up and one of them falls off, then the other person gets it? Because they were both trying to willingly murder themselves. Like, they weren't trying to kill each other. So it makes no sense how Clint got the Soul Stone. It's just really dumb. And then just a little nitpicky thing that I would have liked to see is just, like, I would have liked to see the other characters reacting more to Black Widow's death than just the original characters. Like, how was Rocket, Rhodey, because they keep showing these scenes of her and Rhodey, and, like, their relationship, and they take time out of the movie to have him be like, watch each other 6, but they don't even show his reaction to her death, you know? It's just really weird. It's like, why would you put this in, you know? It's just really strange. Then Doctor Strange's plan is really contrived. They set up a really interesting thing in Infinity War with the one outcome. But, like, so you mean to tell me, like, in all of these outcomes, 14,605 to be exact, in every outcome where they travel back in time, in not one of those outcomes does Nebula's eye not conveniently go off for no reason, connecting to future Nebula's network, and just as Thanos walks onto the ship. That's really stupid. It makes no sense. And it's like, so in not one of these outcomes do they go back in time, get the stones, come back, Thanos doesn't show up from the past, Tony could have lived. Tony didn't have to die at all. Like, you know, it's just like, not one of these outcomes, Nebula's eye doesn't go off, you know, it's just like, it's just, you think, like, honestly, I watched the movie again, and when Nebula's eye just goes off for no reason, I literally laughed. Like, I started laughing. Like, it's so stupid. And it's like, what? You know, it's just really weird and stupid. There are cool concepts as well, but nothing is really done with them. Like I was talking about how Nebula finding out that herself from the future turns out to be good, and then she decides to be evil. That's an interesting concept on paper, but just the way that it's executed in the film, it doesn't really go anywhere. And they have Gamora from the past, and she's like, "Come with me, we can stop him together." But in the end, you know, they don't really get a payoff for that. And, like, I was hoping Nebula would be the one to kill Thanos, but she doesn't. But, you know, her having to kill Nebula from the past is an interesting concept, but nothing is really done with it. Like, nothing, it just kind of ends. Because, you know, the plot has to keep going. You know, I understand that the movie's long, but it's like, they're just like, it felt like they wrote themselves into a corner and they were just like, kill her. Just kill that Nebula, you know? Whatever. You know, it's just really stupid, and just kind of like there's nothing done with it. And then just Clint, like, Hawkeye's character could have been so much more interesting in this movie than what he is, and people are saying this is the most interesting his character's ever been. I honestly would argue against that and say that I think he's actually a better character in Age of Ultron, because he's the only good character in that movie, I think, and I think he's way better in that movie than he is in this. Because in this movie, he just agrees to go with Black Widow in a really bad tonal shift where they hold hands, and then before the next cut even starts, they play this rock music, and then there's Thor opening a beer can. It's like, do. It's like the worst tonal shift from this emotional scene we're supposed to be invested in to this comedic Thor drunk fat scene. It's just really bad. It's a really bad tone shift, and it really bothers me. But, like, she's just like, cliche dialogue, don't give me hope, and then he just decides to come. Like, in my script for my series I wrote, and I'm not saying that they should have done this, like, people are gonna be like, well, you're just, like, mad that they didn't do what you wanted. This isn't stuff that I even really wanted, it's just something that I expected, because I expected it to be more interesting than what they did. So, you know, I respect what they chose to do with the story, but it's just really disappointing what they did with Clint. Like, they could have made it so much more interesting than just, he comes with them. Why doesn't he come with them? He should be mad at them, like, you didn't tell me about Thanos, and then my family died right in front of me, and I didn't get to see them die. Like, it's really dark in the opening scene, but there's nothing done with it, like, except other than that scene where he travels back and he sees his family. Like, that's a nice scene, but other than that, like, the character, there should be more turmoil, anger, and just, like, moral dilemma than there is. Like, she's just like, here, come with me, okay? And he just comes, like, for no reason. He's just like, I'm gonna come, you know? It's just really weird. And then, you know, then there's another thing that I didn't bring up in my Hulk video, but this is something that just really makes me dislike the version of Hulk, is where Scott tells him, you know, this is the last we have of the Pym particles, and he's getting stressed. And then Hulk is just grinning really stupidly, and it's like, you know, it's almost like they wanted to make memes out of that shot. But it just makes me hate Hulk, because it seems like he's not taking anything seriously, and he doesn't care about anybody. It just really made me despise this version of Hulk. It just really bothered me. Like, it's not funny to me. It's like, what's really funny about this version of the Hulk, other than just the fact that it's Hulk doing human-like funny things, because he's like a human Hulk. Like, the only thing that's funny about it is them doing, like, memes and, like, dabbing and stuff with the Hulk. Like, that's the only funny concept about it. The only funny thing is the concept, and then them just doing unfunny things with this concept. You know, it's just kind of like, what's funny about it, you know? And then, what else do we have written down here? I think that's all that I have to talk about in this video, you know? So, wrapping it up, you know, those are all the problems that I haven't brought up that I had with Endgame before. I talked about my positives, and there are definitely more positives with the movie, and I still think it's a really good MCU movie. Like, it's just, I feel like people are afraid of saying that they don't like the movie or that they don't like aspects of the movie, because in all the reviews I've seen people say, I have this problem with the movie, but they're afraid to actually lower the score. Like, that doesn't detract from, like, the actual experience of the movie for them, and, you know, that's fine. But, like, if you're saying you have flaws, like, actually explain your flaws, rather than just saying that it's amazing and not actually having any criticisms of it at all. And, you know, with Infinity War, like, people are gonna be like, well, why didn't you criticize Infinity War? Because I think Infinity War is a great movie. And people are gonna be like, oh, well, why are you comparing the two? Because I can't help but compare them when one is this ultimate, like, ending movie, and the other one is also kind of the beginning of an ultimate ending story. With Infinity War, when one is so much more well-constructed and just in every way, where another one is a mess, and it's like, you know, Endgame is emotional, yes. It's funny, and it's enjoyable and entertaining, but it's flawed, and it's a mess, and, you know, like, we can't change that. Like, we've gotten what we've gotten, and Endgame is a satisfying conclusion for some of these characters, but just when you actually think about it, it's disappointing in some aspects, at least to me, and maybe these flaws don't detract for you from the experience, and that's fine. And I am glad that so many people, these flaws don't detract from the experience for you, but for me, I just can't help but think about these things that just take away from the experience, where I am a really good, like, I am a huge fan of these films and these stories, and just to have this film be, like, I don't think it's a mediocre film, because it's an experience, and it's not mediocre. Like, it's not mediocre in any way, just from an aspect of what it is. Like, it's an event, so it's not, like, a movie that you would consider mediocre, but it's, like, it's a fun movie, it's enjoyable, but at the end of the day, it's a mess, and you can't change that. Like, you can't change you can't change the fact that it's a mess, and it's got great things in it, but it's held together by a string. Just like the things that are great about it are held together by, like, one loose thread. But with Infinity War, everything was just, like, knotted tightly together in just this just beautiful package of a movie. And Endgame is not a bad movie, but it's still a mess, and at least that's my opinion, you know? Like, all of this is personal preference and just pointing out flaws that I think there are with the film, and some of this isn't even personal preference. Like, maybe the Captain America thing doesn't bother you, but some of these things, like the Tony saying 10 years instead of 15 years, that's not even just personal preference, that's just a downright flaw with the movie. So, you know, as always, I love you guys, and I hope this video is probably gonna get hate, but just please respect my opinion, and, you know, more videos are coming soon. I'm going to be making a video on my new schedules very soon, hopefully. I know this video has gone on really long. I just really wanted to pack all my thoughts on Endgame in this final video that I'm going to be doing on the film. So be expecting new videos soon, and as always, I hope you guys have a great day. Take care.